Kamal Sibal, to you first. If I were to say and put those two images there, Prime Minister's outreach to West Asia is a big success. And in the neighborhood, India finding itself, some would say increasingly hemmed in by Chinese influence. Hits and misses, how would you respond?
Look, this is nothing new. China's influence in our neighborhood. After all, look at the relationship with Pakistan. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, their presence in POK. But more than that, we are in direct military confrontation with China. China is a neighbor. And then in Nepal, they have made a lot of inroads over the years. But Prime Minister Modi has been very proactive vis-a-vis Nepal and has tried to redress the situation in India's favor. I have served in Nepal, and I know that the Nepalese will never give up the China card, as all our neighbors, because they want to balance India with China, and they know there's competition between China and India. On top of that, they know that China has far more resources. It can help them in infrastructure, in other development activities. It has a lot of money to spend. So China has certain advantages. Now in Bangladesh, we have been very successful. The most successful relationship in our neighborhood today is with Bangladesh, but Bangladesh also plays the China card. Sri Lanka, we have now established good ties with Sri Lanka, very good ties with Sri Lanka, and they have paid the price of becoming close to China, and they realize it. But nevertheless, they also play the China card. They are now trying to balance things. Now, for example, for 1 year, they will not allow Chinese ships to come into Sri Lankan waters. So you see, when it comes to hits and misses, one shouldn't assume that India or any other country is fully in control of the results of its foreign policy, because the foreign policy means that other players are also involved and they have to reciprocate. They have their own interests. There can be clashes of interest. Look at the United States, look at Russia, look at China. All of them have serious problems with their neighbors, as also in certain regions of the world. So I would say that let's not simplify, to my mind, the situation and try and compare our success in West Asia, which is obvious, which is dramatic, and talk about our difficulties in our neighborhood, which is a long-standing problem. And I have written about this and reflected.
No, but there will, I'm not simplifying it, but there is a tendency at times to only focus on the hits and not look at where we've got, where perhaps there have been misses. You mentioned, interestingly, Bangladesh as a successful relationship that has been built in the neighborhood. But there are others where the successes have been much less visible, and certainly Maldives has become the latest example, perhaps, of where we've got a couple of things wrong. I'll come to that in a moment. But while Awad, looking at those images that are coming in, does that surprise you? No Indian Prime Minister has invested, it seems, as much in India's relationship with the United Arab Emirates. The Prime Minister has been there more often than any other Indian Prime Minister to Dubai. Would you concede that his West Asia outreach has surprised many like you, who maybe in 2014 would have thought that that would be an area ignored?
Well, not only in 2014, at 2002 also as well, because what we have seen, the development in India over the 2 decades, Rajdeep, and you are also following us, we know that the development in the West Asia has been always the proximity to Indian affairs, because the Indian food security, oil security, and the expatriate Indians living in the Gulf is a prime important for India. But having said that, I would say the Prime Minister, when he took office in 2014, made sure that he can reach out to most of the Arab nations. And if you see the GCC country, he has been awarded the top awards in each country he had been visiting. So that seemed to give a clear indication of the importance of the Gulf country investing in India. In fact, if we look at the trade relation between India and the Gulf country, especially with the Emirates, we see that there is a rise more than 10% annually of the trade relation between the two countries, despite the fact that UAE is a small country while India is a giant subcontinent. So, but nevertheless, the trade relation has been growing. The strong bonds between India and the Arab world has been very good. And in fact, we always consider, Rajdeep, that India as a natural extension to West Asia. It's not that the separation has been there. So because we have relation goes for centuries, for lots of deep in history. But I think what the Prime Minister is trying here is to show that the pragmatism in Indian foreign policy might be succeeding in giving India a new status in the international affairs, and especially in the Gulf region, because the development in our region is so fast and so contradicting each time, where you can support, where you have to oppose, where you can stand. Some section in the Arab world see that the relation of India with one Arab state may not reflect the relation of India with the rest of the Arab country. I would just be cautious in saying that, because some of the Arab countries feel that the IMEC, where India is trying to promote India as an alternative route to the Chinese Silk Route with Saudi Arabia and Emirates and Jordan and Israel, may not reflect India's status as an Arab or a global reach to the rest of the Arab countries. So I think overall, the relation has been, over the years, has been growing strong. And I think Indian foreign policy has been a success story since the 90s onwards.
KC Singh, your sense, Prime Minister Modi, his reach out to West Asia, has it surprised you? The reason I ask is because there was a sense when he came to power in 2014, will the Muslim world, the Islamic world, embrace Prime Minister Modi because of the backdrop of the 2002 riots? Instead, what we've seen is relations, particularly with certain countries like UAE, have strengthened immeasurably. Has that surprised you? Would you say this is a clear hit of the Prime Minister's diplomacy?
Look, I spent 4.5 years in UAE, so the relationship was even then very close. Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed came to India before I moved to Iran. He came to India. When I met him, I said, Your Highness, you promised to go to India, you haven't. So at a very short notice, he came. But Prime Minister Vajpayee and Mr. Mishra, Principal Secretary that time, were looking at the Gulf differently. For them, Iran was a very important component. So they were not focusing so much on UAE. So they met him, they received the letter from his father. But I think the doors were not that open at that stage, because they were balancing relationship with Iran, which was seen as very important till 2002, 2003, when they got into the problem of the nuclear issue. Let me just comment on the neighborhood. One point, that essentially we must not forget that we have a problem wherever there are democracies. And when you have an election in a democracy and the government changes, so quite often the new person who's coming in, if we are close to the previous one, there are difficulties that come in. And Muzu was hinting it from the beginning. In fact, his whole campaign was get India out of Maldives. This is nothing new what has happened. His deputy ministers have taken it to a very rude and an excessive extent. But essentially the policy is the same, that they wanted India out and they want China in, and they're a part of the Belt and Road. Now, therefore, similarly now Bangladesh, we can say, I've written a piece which will come out tomorrow, that we can say that Sheikh Hasina is close to us, she has won. But if there is no Sheikh Hasina, then you get Khalda Zia. If you have a very one-sided election and the entire opposition is opposing you, the Americans have called it a fixed election, then the other party that comes in, that then turns its policy around. So, there has to be a little balancing. We haven't played that role. When we see we are very close to one government and that government has put the previous president in jail in Maldives, then if it changes, obviously there are going to be repercussions. So as a major power, we have to start playing both sides. You can't just play one side. Now coming to the Gulf, I think let's not focus excessively on Emirates. There are huge divisions in the Gulf at the moment. And we can see what is happening in Qatar with 8 naval officers in jail. Kuwait is sort of not involved in it. And essentially it's Abraham Accords. The Americans were trying to wean away Emirates and Saudi Arabia to create an alternative security order which balances the Iranian influence in all across the Shia corridor. Now that has come apart after the Hamas thing. It's just not working because the Saudis are not willing to move forward. And we don't see an easy solution. So in a sense, Mohammed bin Zayed is an outlier because, he has not withdrawn from his engagement with Israel, whereas Saudi Arabia hasn't moved forward. Many of the other, Bahrain is quiet, even though they also joined the Abraham Accords. So there is a division in the Gulf, GCC, and between China, Russia, and Iran, they're trying to devise a new order. And that is the one which Americans are contesting. And Mohammed bin Zayed is a factor in that. You take the Houthis. Mohammed bin Zayed sent his forces to join the Emirati forces to fight the Houthis. And he had pulled them out. They could not fight the Houthis. Houthis are willing to die for their land. So you can have money, you can have all the Western equipment, but because your population is small and you don't have a history of military campaigns, so you can play these games, and Americans call them the little Sparta of the Gulf and so on and so forth. So let's not exaggerate their role in the Gulf. It's limited, they're important for us, but then we are also 38% of the population is the Indian diaspora. So we've always been important.
You make an important point about the differences that exist within the West Asian region. Qatar is an example that you cited. India at the moment would like to have its naval personnel returned. Qatar seems to be working within a different arc of influence.